Hello, everyone. Sorry, I'm a little bit late tonight. We've had a busy day today getting ready for our 13th anniversary for the shop and for our visit with Ava Motherwell. And I've been cleaning the house and doing other work today. And I had set an alarm um, so that I knew if I to give myself about 10 minutes time. Um, to get ready for the live, and it didn't go off, or I didn't hear it. I don't know, but I tried to get on here as quickly as possible, and hopefully y'all are having a good Friday, and that y'all are gonna enjoy the weekend. For us, we always work on the weekends, so um, it's not, how some people are like, thank goodness it's Friday. For us, it's all kind of runs together. So there's that. All right. So I see a couple folks have tuned in. If you're watching, please say hello. Michelle's watching. Um, I don't know if if folks are gonna see this necessarily, um, because I am starting a wee bit later than what this was scheduled for, and sometimes I think when I don't go on exactly when we're supposed to go or earlier, it kind of messes with the algorithm. So there's that. Um, our neighbor Susie's watching. Carmen's watching. Hey there. It has been a while. Suzanne is watching. Hopefully everything is well where you are. Um, so if you didn't see, we've been on live today a couple of different times. William went on earlier today while he was photographing some stuff and got the chance to talk with y'all and work with y'all. So that's nice. And then he and Ava popped on real quick around 7 o'clock or so, and they gave you a little sneak peek of the trunk show, a part of the epic road trip. Um, I'm going to ask you not to look too closely to the top of my head because while I was shaving my head today, the trimmer ran out of battery about halfway through. So I tried to do that, but the back, we're just gonna pretend like, I don't know if that's like a mullet thing for people who are bald headed, but it's awfully patchy, y'all. Y'all may not even notice, but I just brushed the side of my head and I could feel it, and I was like, anyways, we're gonna do our best and try our hardest. Suzanne says, I'm well, but the coast got hit hard. I was about to turn around to turn this off, but then y'all would have saw the patchy doodle. So we're going to just use the power of our imagination and just ignore all of this in the back. I see my mother-in-law is watching. Howdy. Um, yes, we've got a lot of plans this weekend. Hopefully everything, I kind of feel like um, it's always the most stressful right before these big events. And once we're in the middle of it, it's fine. You can only do what you can do. And you kind of have to just like let go and just be one with the universe or whatever. And, but right up until you get to that point, then it's like, so we're in that moment right now. At least I am. I think William made peace with it like last night. He got some cleaning done. He's like, all right, that's as much as I can do. And I had today to panic still yet. I got mostly everything on my chore list to do. However, there's still a lot that didn't get done. So I'm just going to have to hope that that's all right. And hopefully everything will work out. Amanda's watching. She says, hi, Andrew. I just watched the sneak peek at the store. Oh, good. So tonight, I had a couple different ideas of what I wanted to do tonight, and we are gonna go live tomorrow night with a big selling event. So I decided not to do a bunch of selling tonight because we're gonna do that tomorrow night. So so I didn't want to overwhelm everybody and blow everybody's budget the night before the festivities. So I thought today we could do something where we do resin. I've been working with resin for a very long time. I used to have this neighbor when I was growing up in Florida who had a yard sale. And in the 80s, she did these earrings where you take like the cardboard and then you like smear puffy paint all over it and then you cover it in resin and then you're like fashion. Um, and so I guess that didn't work out for her. So she had these boxes and boxes of resin, and I didn't really know what I was buying, I don't think, at the time. But I bought that. I bought one of the boxes from the big box, and I was like, "This is so cool." And I really probably shouldn't have been allowed to do that. I was a child and working with resin is sometimes sticky. And I was afraid that I'd get in trouble with my mom. So I did the resin in my closet. And let's just say you probably should not do resin in the closet. Maybe that's why I am the way I am today. Um, but yeah. And so I used to go and knock on her door periodically and ask to buy another box of resin. And eventually she got tired of me coming to her house knocking, and she's like, "I'm not a store, you know." And I was like, "Well, you're the only place I can get it." And so she was like, "All right, well, I'll just give you the rest." And I don't think she gave it to me like love and kindness and supporting the arts of the youth, but out of the let me get rid of him so he doesn't keep knocking on my door. But I've been working with resin for a very long time and used to do all kinds of stuff with it and dried flowers and embed it in resin and do this and do that and make molds. And I was on a PBS show called Beads, Baubles, and Jewels, if you saw that. And I did some resin demos. And I was on a show called Make It Artsy and did resin demos, and I've taught resin in multiple different places all over the country at the Pittsburgh Polymer Clay Guild when that was still a thing, and out in Port Townsend and all over. So I've used resin a lot. The resin that I'm going to be using tonight is a little bit of a different formula than I'm used to working with, so it may get a little bit interesting. Um, It's maybe be interesting tonight. But we're gonna roll with it and see what we're gonna do. All right. So I see a couple more folks have tuned in. Um, my mother-in-law said the sneak peek looked great, so colorful. Yeah, Ava brought a lot of really fun stuff. If you didn't know, Ava runs the whole bead show and the bead renaissance shows. So normally she has great big booth, 14 tables kind of business. So this is a pared down selection of what she has to offer. And we're so thankful that she made a point to stop out and visit us because we're just a little tiny store, little tiny thing. And we're lucky to be able to be included in this wonderful cross country voyage. So many thanks to her and for coming out and celebrating with us for our 13th anniversary for the shop. Can you believe it? I don't know. I can't believe it. 13 years ago. That's a long time. So there's a couple different things to be aware of, and I'm just going to touch on these briefly. So tomorrow and Sunday, during the day, we're open from 11 to 6, and then the trunk show is going to be live, or you can stop in while we're open, but she's definitely going to be there from 12 to 4 every day. And then tomorrow night, we're going to have a live event for all of our friends who couldn't make it, and that's going to start at 7:30, I believe. So make sure to tune in for that. One of the other things I wanted to mention is that I have a show up right now at the Manos Gallery in Tarentum, PA. That's part of their 24 mini show, and I have 24 pieces in that collection. And hopefully, folks are able to, if you're local, take a look over there. And also, if you can't make it out there, you can always message Ernesto at the Manos Gallery and talk about that with him about getting those to you. I believe I've marked them at 98 a piece, which I think is pretty good for original art. I've been selling and making artwork for a long time, and hopefully folks will take advantage of those, and I'll get invited back to work at that gallery, because it's always nice when you have a creative community that you can always work with. So check that out if you haven't already. I posted a reel on my Instagram with some highlights about that. There's a lot of really other wonderful artwork available, so check that out if you so desire. Now, one of the other things that I'm going to mention before we get into kind of like demo setup is we still have kits available that are going to help fundraise for Beads of Courage. And we also have a bunch of mixes or luxury bead blends still available. So please, please, please grab those up. Grab them up, y'all, because we're going to make our donation soon. And once we make our donation, they have a fundraising deadline. So they're only able to, they have to raise enough to put the down payment down. And we're trying to help them to do that. And the only way that we can help them is if you buy those kits and bead blends. Now, if you're not interested in doing that and you're like, I don't like those colors, I don't like those beads, whatever, you can always go directly to Beads of Courage, and if you're able to directly donate to them. So there's a lot of different ways that you can help them achieve their goal. They're a really wonderful organization, completely nonprofit, and they help children and families facing serious illness and help heal through art, which I think is such an amazing and wonderful thing. And Jean is pretty much an angel on this earth doing good things and helping people. So if you're not familiar with them, check them out. That's beadsofcourage.org. And then the fundraising is through a different program. So if you go to the post on our website, if you go to the listing on our website, there's a direct link to their Forever Home campaign. And, we just finished our Forever Home campaign. So it kind of maybe sounds confusing because we just did a big Forever Home thing. But theirs is separate, so don't get confused with that. Norma says, I watched all the Beads, Baubles, and Jewel shows, and I'm sure I saw you. Oh, good. And Sandra says, hi, y'all, and glad you're okay. Yeah, I'm doing much better. I kind of pushed it a little bit today. So we're going to see how that's going to go. Hopefully, knock on wood, nothing bad happens. But I was trying to bust a move and clean the house and do all that stuff. And I may have pushed myself a little bit too much. So I'm going to try to rest up. In other good news, I applied to be a part of this kind of a collective of art jewelry makers, and I'll post more about this later. But I got accepted, so they like me. They really, really like me. I don't know if they actually like me, but they accepted me in their club. So I'm sure I will be posting more about that. They're mostly based in Europe, so my goal is to start showing more and showing in bigger venues. And I think one of the big venues right now currently is Munich Jewelry Week. So I'm gonna try to get over there. That's one of my goals is to go and travel abroad before I get too old and can't go up many stairs. Um, Learn getting this kind of gout flare up really put things in perspective, and I want to do it all before I can't. So this is a step towards that goal, and I'm super excited that they accepted me in their club. And yeah, um, my mother-in-law said congratulations, thank you. Amanda says congratulations, and then Sandra says, "Don't tell William that." Tell him what? That I want to travel, more travel. I think he knows. We've talked about it. He's done more traveling than I have. I've done a lot of domestic traveling. So if you want to know about the China Buffet in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, I can tell you about it. If you want to know about horse barns in Chapel Hill, I can tell you about it. I've been all over in the U.S. Because I used to do the circuit shows for bead shows, and so I was pretty much like Ava, going from place to place to place um, for years and years. So I've traveled a lot domestically, but for as far as international traveling, I haven't done nearly anything. So I would like to do that, and it's a part of my goal. I've got to manifest it, put it out into the universe and make it so. Um, my mother-in-law said, "Yes, do it while you're young." Yeah, because otherwise, what they gonna do? Push me around in a wheelchair? I don't want that. I want to be able, I want to be able to enjoy it. So we're going to try to make that happen. And also, one of the cool things about this is, in our shop, we sell beads that are from all over the world. And so I want to go and uh, be where the people are. I'm having an aerial moment right now where I'm going to start belting out a song about thingamacallits and whatsamadoodles. But no, really, it would be lovely to go and travel. And I've had some friends who have offered to go with me and to travel with me. And we've made lots of plans. And every time I've made a plan to go, it's kind of the bottom fell out of it. So I was supposed to go to the Venice Biennial like 3 or 4 different times, and each time something happened. And eventually I was like, okay, I'm just not even gonna try to plan for this anymore. um, but I think I've gotten to the other side of that, so we'll see. But it'd be nice. I have some friends in the Czech Republic who are trying to get me to come over and look at beads and where they're made and stuff. So I think that'd be fun. And a couple of my friends have done it already. And some of my friends go very frequently. So it'd be nice to do that. And also, we have a lot of friends and customers all over the world. So it'd be nice to kind of go where they are. Um, Michelle says, break time. Now I can chat and watch you. Oh, good. Norma says, good goal, Andrew. I hope you're successful in getting to travel. I think I'm excited for that. At least I hope, and I'm hopeful that that will happen. This past year has been really challenging. It's been super duper hard, but there's also been a lot of really wonderful things. And I made a goal to see more of the craft schools this summer, and I was pretty successful, I think, in that. and I've got to go to um, a bunch of different craft schools in this country. I also had a goal this year to show um, uh, I try to keep it like once a month, but really the way that some of the shows are, they lasted longer, they were shorter, or whatever. And so far, I'm on track to have shown at least 12 times this year, which I think is pretty big. I mean, it's something that, it was important to me. Um, when I was a young artist, it was something that like I really wanted to show more, and I've been able to do that. So um, this year I've shown in England and Massachusetts and Tennessee and New York City and here in Pennsylvania, several times in Pennsylvania. Um, I'm in a show right now, and I'm planning to be in a couple shows in the next few months. So, yeah. So, I think it's good to set a goal for yourself and work towards it. Sometimes it's easier than other times. Sometimes it feels like an uphill battle. And then sometimes you get what you want, and you're like, what did I wish for? Because there was a point when I was getting ready for this 24 mini show, and I was thunderstruck tired, and I was just wore out, and I was like, what did I done do to myself? Because at that point, it just the pieces more. It seemed like I wasn't making any progress, and I was like, "What the hey? I need to land this plane and get this done." But sometimes when I feel like that, then I just have to remember to be grateful for all the opportunities I've been given, and that this is the what I've worked for. This is where or part of what part of the steps to the things that I want to achieve. So I can't be disgruntled about them because then that's no fun. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip the camera and we're going to get set up. So, yeah, it kind of was a little bit of a mess today getting things ready for tonight's live. So I'm gonna kind of have to set up as we go, but that's a good opportunity to like really talk through it. So I hope you don't mind. This is not the power of TV, and we don't have any production assistants. And as much as I'd like to do a Martha and have be bossing folks around to do stuff. That's just not the way. Diane says, I feel like that about these dog advent calendars I decided to make. Like, what did I decide to do? Yeah, I feel that because sometimes, it's like, I'm like, oh, this is such a great idea. And then I'm like, ooh. But, we just have to persevere and keep trying, and hopefully everything will work out. At least that's the hope. All right. One of my hopes is I didn't realize how allergic to cats Ava is. And I'm like, please, 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 let's not have to get a hotel at the last second. So we're going to send out that positive energy that she can survive Catmageddon up in Ligonier, Pennsylvania. As I see like cat hair floating in the air, I was like, oh boy. Cheryl says, hi, Andrew. I'm going to eat my nachos and learn this process. Oh, good. Good. Some of you all probably have seen me do this before. Some of y'all have probably seen me do this many times. And some of y'all have probably even tried it in person. So I'm going to turn the camera around and you're going to see the ceiling, or you're currently seeing the ceiling. Whoop. I wish there was a little bit of a preview. So I accidentally do any kind of crotch shots. Not that I'm like going pants free or anything. So if you didn't see, this is the finished pendant that I started the other night. We did a little last week, I think. Was it last week? I can't remember. It was a Friday night at some point, and we did a little monster making, and we made this. So if you decide to make your own little monster faces before you add all this beaded embellishment, you can make a mold of your polymer clay creations, and then guess what? I guess somebody did good in the sports ball because there's like sirens and cheering and like excited sounds. I don't know if y'all can hear that in the background, but I can. The way that the valley is situated and where our house is, I can hear. It's like I'm basically at the football game right now. But anyways, so if you do decide to get your polymer clay out and get crafty, you too can make molds and then make multiples. Unfortunately, it's too late for this one, but I can talk about this. Now, one of the things that I'm going to talk about, and this is something I'm going to stress, I'm going to stress this, y'all. We're gonna have a moment. It's gonna be we're gonna have a Peter Parker and Uncle Ben moment coming up. All right. Brace yourselves. So with great power comes great responsibility. And you're gonna say, what the heck? I'm not shooting webs out nowhere. Well, guess what? Just because you can make a mold of something does not mean you should. All right, I'm going to say that again. Just because you can make a mold of something does not mean you should. And what I mean by that is that I've seen this happen so many times. So many times. People will get and make molds of stuff and then they don't know who made it or they don't care or whatever, and they'll make a mold of someone else's artwork and they'll pour it and sell it and get in trouble because they're copying other people's work. Please, please, please do not do this and respect the intellectual property of the artists and original makers. All right. So I'm going to have this as a preface, a little warning, disclaimer. Please, if you make multiples and copies of stuff, make it off of something that you've made or off of something that's like a found object that is not an artisan made item. But please don't copy other people's work. And I have to say that because I've seen it happen. I've seen it. There were classes at national conventions where they were showing how to knock off people's work, and that's not cool. So please, 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 just because you can make a mold of anything, I mean anything, you can get real intimate with mold making if you so desire. And in that case, that's your own business. That's not my problem. That's a personal thing. You can do whatever you want in the privacy of your own home. If you have questions about that, talk to somebody else because I don't need no pictures or evidence of this knowledge in my brain. So that's the other preface of that. That's the other disclaimer. If you're gonna get like intimate time with the mold making materials, that you can do that, but I don't want to be a part of that. All right. So two things. Don't copy other people's work and don't share your intimate mold making experiences. Right? So just so y'all know, I'm not trying to be harsh or anything. But that's just what I gotta say. And then the other night, last night, I made this. Still thinking on it. I probably should tape this up before it gets scattered all to Kingdom Come. But I'm just gonna put this off to the side for now and hope for the best so it doesn't come loose and then get scattered all to the four winds of the earth. All right. So one of the other things we did this week is we showed how to make, or I showed you how I make my polymer clay pieces. Hopefully you all enjoyed that, and that if you were able to, you got some, because I thought that was fun. It was Troll Request Lab. I've been working on them. I didn't get to work on them today. I had hoped that I would be able to get to work on them today, but I didn't get a chance to work on them today. But hopefully by the end of the weekend, I'll have that all situated. All right. So I'm going to defabric this area so that, you know, we don't have sticky, messy time. And I'm going to put down the glass, I think. I'm going to put down the glass. Am I going to do it? Let me see. All right. So I'm not going to put down the glass as it turns out. I'm going to put this down. And that's going to help protect the table from any spillages. All right. Oh, I see Angela's here. Hey, Angela. All right. So we're going to get the box of treasure out, and then we're going to talk about it. So when I carve my masters, like there's this one. I carved this one, and I usually will do them in polymer clay. Like this is a big one, and I was making ornaments for a while, so I made some larger pieces. And some of y'all may have seen some of these, but some of these y'all probably haven't seen these, depending on how new you are to the AG Bead fam. You know what? I didn't always show everything. You know, here's a little thing. Like this thing I never made into production. I don't think, at least. I can't remember if I did. Like, there was this one person, they were getting married, and they were in love with that movie Splash. Do y'all remember that? Daryl Hannah and Tom Hanks. You know, I also had fond feelings for that movie back in the day. Anyway, so they wanted a piece like the one that she was wearing. So I kind of made a version of my own version of that necklace. And the necklace she had this lion head. And then they ended up not getting married. So then I went through all that trouble and they didn't use it. And sometimes I would paint the masters or the models that I was working on. But mostly I just leave them bare polymer clay. But all of these are pieces that I then eventually molded and created silicone molds with. I'm not going to show how to make the molds tonight. And the main reason why I'm not going to show that is because I don't know where that stuff is. So it's somewhere around here. If I see it, I'll do one. I'll do a small little sample for you. And like there's this one. This is a cardinal. I made that for William's grandma. And this one was a little like a abominable snowman one. And I was making holiday ornaments. And this one is Krampus. You know how many times I've been told that my artwork is demonic because of Krampus? I was like, y'all, just read a book. Can we just like not harsh yuck my yum? All right, I made this green man. And this one was very popular. This little Hamsa inspired piece. And some of these, like I made this bird girl. I don't think that ever went into production. But there's a lot of stuff that I've made over the years that, for whatever reason, I may have made it or may not have made it. So the resin that I use is a 2-part mix. I use the fast cast resin because it sets up very, very quickly. This is really great for production. If you tend to be on the slower side, like you're not a very quick worker, then maybe don't get this one because this stuff sets up. And I'll show you more about that. If you don't mix it right, this is what happens. So I poured this one, but I got the ratios wrong. Guess what happens? Years later, it's like this. Bendy, y'all. So that's less than ideal. And there's no way to fix that. I mean, that's been years. If it would have set up, it would have set up at this point. When they first come out of the molds, they look like this. And I'm going to show you this, and we'll talk about like demolding and things like that. But they look like this. Sometimes you can add colorants and dyes to your resin, and then you'll get a colored resin. Generally speaking, I do lots of painting techniques. So I used to add more colors. However, one thing I found is that when I added colors, it would sometimes slow the cure time, or I would get stuff like this where it's like bendy. I'd get stuff where like I mixed a black in there and it turned kind of this gray color. And I think that threw off my ratio a little bit. So, I tend to not do that as much. And then when I'm working, sometimes what I'll do is I'll put down like a color, like a wash of color on it, and then I'll paint on top of it. And that's how I'll get, I can build up layers of paint and color. Now, if you're in a workshop with me coming up in less than a month, I'll be at Sawtooth. Today is the last day to sign up. So if you had wanted to take a class with me and you're wanting to take the one at Sawtooth, today is the last day. So in the class, we'll be talking about how to color metal, but a lot of times those same techniques can then be added to polymer clay. Now, not everything's universal because, some things are the chemical compositions are different. So there are things that you can do on metal that you can't do on polymer and vice versa. One of the things that you can't do is you can put nail polish on metal all day long, but you can't do it on polymer because it'll eat it away. And then you have sticky time, and sticky time is nobody's friend. All right, so there are ways that you can add color, and you can add different things like that. This one also didn't work out. Look at this. Look at this hot garbage. I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to be like, hello. I did not have enough hardener put into this resin. So now Andrew's making me talk on the live. So this is like a not good example. But the reason why I keep these is so that y'all can learn, and when you go and you're doing this in your own home, then you don't feel like be like, oh my gosh, I'm a failure. This happens, depending on the humidity, how quickly you stir, what you stir with, all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of things that can impact how your resin sets up. So just keep that in mind. Don't be too harsh on yourself. Now there are clear resins that you can dye. Like this one is a clear that had been dyed a little bit with red. I think they're really cool. You can even put stuff inside of them. So like this one has like this fun kind of um it's making my camera freak out. I was like, what's happening here? So you can put all kinds of fun stuff in them and embed that. However, this resin, this one that I'm showing you right now, sets up completely different than the other one. The fast cast resin, this one sets up in minutes. This one sets up in 8 hours, y'all. 8 hours. Minutes, hours. So just keep that in mind, y'all. Because if you think that it's gonna be you're gonna be like busting out all the clear in your heart, maybe you can, but it sets up differently. So one of the things that I always recommend before you get started with a project like this is to read the manufacturer's instructions. And I know that's boring, nobody wants to do it. It sounds sometimes it's too convoluted. They just want to get down to the fun part and get mixing. But the reality is that all the resins are slightly different, and sometimes things look the same, but they're not actually the same. So it's very good to look at and read the manufacturer's instructions. Now, the other thing that I'm going to mention is a little bit, a little bit about safety. So this, I'm going to tell you the safety time so that you are prepared for this. If you want to ignore my warnings, you can ignore my warnings. However, y'all are grown adults, hopefully. But what I am going to say is there's a reason why I'm making these warnings for y'all. So, one of the things I'm going to talk about is ventilation. It's super duper important to have ventilation. In this room, we've got kind of a cross breeze going. I've got the window open. I've also got an air purifier going. So it is going to help with ventilation. If you are in an enclosed space and there's no windows and you're just going to hotbox it with the chemicals, then you may have some problems. You may be seeing visions. I don't know how this acts. You don't want to do that. There was an artist named Ava Hess. She's a very brilliant artist. However, her life was cut short because she got wild with the fiberglass and the resin in the fiberglass, and then got the brain cancer. So don't be doing no Ava Hess style. Just wear, if you have sensitivities to chemicals, you can wear gloves, you can wear a respirator. Make sure that you think about your health and safety. All right. Now, one of the other things I'm going to talk about before we get into it is I'm going to show you the molds. So these were the masters. So what this means, Diane said the bendy ones look fun to play with, though. Yeah, they're fun to play with, but also if I try to do that on purpose, I probably could never do that again. That's one of the ones that it just happened, and you just have to be aware of that. So there's a couple things that you should be aware of. Resin has a shelf life, y'all. It does not last forever and ever and ever and ever and always. So keep that in mind. I cannot tell you how much resin I've had to throw away and get rid of because I was like, oh, I was just going to use this as a little tip, and then it spoiled the batch.
Oh.
Hi, William.
I'm just stopping in real quick for bringing stuff in.
Oh, good.
How's it going?
Fine, I guess. I'm showing some masters of polymer clay.
Pouring yet?
No, I had to do the talk.
The talk.
Yeah, I had to warn them about.
I heard you warning about don't copy people.
Correct.
And don't show your privates.
Correct. To me, you can do that on the
OnlyFans.
OnlyFans.
You can show it to people who are okay with that.
If they're consenting for that, then you can do whatever you want. However, I'm not consenting, y'all. Let me just say that. I had one time I was at this bead show, And I was
go help.
okay.
Also start some stir fry.
Okay, bye. So one time I was at a bead show and this lady came up to the booth and I was by myself and she was like, "Oh, I have something to show you." And I was like, "What?" She was talking about these riding crops, and I thought she meant for horses, like she's like embellishing riding crops for horses. There's a whole world of equestrian stuff that, is a multi-million dollar business, and there used to be a shop in town called Equine Chic, and they sell boots and hats and all gloves and all kinds of stuff. Um, and so she was making riding crops, and she was like, "Oh, you want to see the riding crop?" And I was like, "Okay, I'll look." And she's like, "I've used your beads and to make them." So what she did not tell me is that the riding crops that she was making were not for horses; they were for people. And so she went through her website, this dark website, and she showed me all these rosy bottoms that had been spanked by all these things. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I was trying not to be like act affronted and like clutch on my pearls and stuff and be like, oh my gosh. But you know what? It took a deep strength not to go run and hide because I was a little bit shook. I was not prepared for that. So, anyways, Susie says, "Will you be set up for 4 days?" Probably not, because we don't have anywhere to set up. So, no, which is kind of a relief because it usually was like super stressful for forever and ever and ever when we had a shop in town. But now that we don't, maybe we just walk around and have a good time like everybody else. But no, we don't have a place to show, so unfortunately not. Maybe next year, but we didn't sign up in time. Um, and the other thing is that we're going to be gone because I'm going to be teaching. Um, I'm going to be teaching in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and I don't know if it's that weekend or the next weekend that's 4 days, but yeah, we'll see. Cheryl says, "Don't worry about it, William." Yeah, I worried about it for everybody. All right. So I showed you the masters. I showed you some of the finished ones. This one is, I showed you this one. This is a painted one. This one got broke. Gertie, my beautiful child, this broke this. I guess she didn't like it, or she didn't like that year. She's like, and I watched it happen in real time. She jumped and then something fell on this and broke it off. So one of the cool things about this is that polymer clay is strong, but resin is stronger. So I can do that. And if I did that with this business, then it's some pieces. So um, you know. So this, if I did that with the polymer clay, then I would have it. This would be in multiple pieces instead of just one. So that's one of the reasons why resin is good, is because it's much stronger and more durable. So you can do a lot of stuff with it that you can't do like this one. Bless its little homely heart.
Someone to say hi.
Howdy. Welcome to the junk.
Hi, can I come and say hi?
Yes. Hi, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you. Can I interrupt? Or is he in the middle of tutorial?
You never interrupt. It's good to see you.
I'm so glad to be here in your beautiful town.
Yeah, thanks for coming all the way across the country.
I know.
So I'll
What
put
are you
this.
doing?
We're gonna do some resin.
Okay.
Resin pouring. So I showed them some of the masters that we're working on, how to make them in polymer clay.
Oh my god.
And we did that the other night, and we made this little face. live.
Oh,
And then
is that ET? Almost.
kind
No.
of a little
Scary
gooey.
Just
ET.
a little
Ooh,
glue.
the
Little-
eyes like follow you. That's so cool.
I don't know if that sounded like, oh, so cool. Be like, oh, the eyes are
They're
following.
following me.
But Halloween time.
Yeah, I love
so,
it.
So we are gonna do some resin pouring tonight,
Okay.
and yeah,
Okay. Well, I'll let you get to it. I just wanted to say hi.
yeah, it's good to see you. I'm sorry I didn't get to meet you at the shop,
It's okay.
but
We'll hang out tomorrow.
yeah, and maybe after this is done.
Yeah.
This will be fast. Once
Okay.
once we're
Get to it.
there are people saying hi.
Hi. Okay, I won't interrupt anymore. Oh my God, there's so many beads everywhere. I love it.
But it's not though. Have you been to the cottage yet?
No, we didn't stop at the cottage.
Then
That
there's
was on the
really
way down that big
beads.
hill.
Oh, okay.
And I was going to stop with you, but I was like, we gotta get the groceries.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then it's
Like,
gonna get closed.
yeah.
But that's really lots
That's
of
like
beads.
this times 100.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I have to see that.
gird yourself.
Okay.
Prepare.
Okay.
All right. So I'm super excited to see Ava. It's been a couple of years, I think. It doesn't feel like that because we have the internet. But All right. So one of the things that we're gonna do is we're gonna bust out these friends, the pearlescent pigment powders, and those are also going to be our friends. And that can be a way to one act as a mold release, just like how we did with the polymer the other night, but it will also act as adding color, the first layer of color. Now, one of the other things that this does is it also creates a tooth for your paint to stick to. So that also helps increase the surface because sometimes with a resin, when it cures, it's kind of shiny, and shiny stuff generally it doesn't stick. Sometimes what happens is it will just peel right off if it's not treated and roughed up a little bit so that there's something for it to stick in. So we're going to use some pearlescent pigment powders, and that will help in a couple different ways. Now, off camera, I have prepared many molds. Now, these are all, maybe not all, but most of our molds. And these are a two-part, most of them are two-part silicone mold. I did do earlier this year, I did do a YouTube video on how to make poured silicone molds using Smooth On. So if you didn't see that, it was on that bunny head, and I showed how to make multiples of that. So this one is a little bit easier to do. You just take 2-part equal amounts and you squish it up until it's an even, consistent color, and then you just stick it on top of whatever you're trying to mold. And there you go. You have a mold after it sets up. So all of these molds are kind of done that way. And so I've got this one. This is Dan says, I am doing the Delmont Apple Festival this year. If you go to that, I'm trying to. Oh, were you talking to Diane? Oh, I thought you were talking to me. Dan says, I didn't sign up for 4 days either. I'm thinking about doing it next year. Sorry. I thought you were talking to me. But anyways, if you want to check out Diane's stuff, she makes super cute things. I've checked out her booth. We went and booth sat for a minute. So anyways, so these are the silicone molds, and they hold up pretty well. So if you do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pours, they may not hold up very well. However, so far in my experience, you know, I've made bunches and bunches of pieces and they've held up fairly well. And you may have noticed that some of these are already dusted with the pearlescent pigment powder. And one of the reasons why I do that is because I like to have kind of like a air with a spare. So if I make pollen or I make up a batch of resin and I'm working, I like to have multiple molds ready so that if I have a little bit of extra in my cup, I can just pour it into a mold that's waiting, and then I don't have as much waste. So that's one of the things that I do. Sometimes with a fast cast resin, if you kind of dilly dally or kind of lollygag or whatever, then you're gonna have issues where, um, sometimes it just doesn't, it just doesn't work out. Sometimes you work a little bit slow, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, it's already hard in the cup. So you do have to work with mindfulness and intention. I know some folks they're like, oh, I hate to do that. I hate to be mindful. I just want to go and play and not have to worry about anything. Well, you can still play. However, it sets up really quick. So there's benefits to that, but there's also you have to kind of be quick and not wait. Um, and I'm not generally a person like that. I kind of am a slower person. I don't work tremendously quickly. So just keep that in mind. If I can do it, you can do it too. So there's a big box of these because I've made so many different things over the years and I've made molds of them. And some of them I have multiple molds of because I used to make holiday ornaments every year. And so I would make 3 or 4 molds of the same thing, and then I'd pour them, and had, like, my own little assembly line. So, just keep, that in mind as well because you don't have to do just one. And it's actually good to have, a master because sometimes what happens is if you make a piece and then say the mold breaks, then that can be it. So sometimes I know it's tempting sometimes to sell all the masters and it's like I made this work. What do I do with it now? But sometimes it's good to hold on to that just in case your mold breaks or it slowly breaks down after your thousandth pour or whatever. So it's good to have it so that you can make another one. So just keep that in mind so that, when you're making stuff, you can hold on to your pieces. And I like to put them in a box that say masters. And then that way I know not to get rid of them. And yeah, so anyways, just keep that in mind. Um, and yeah, so let's get to it. Michelle says, wow, you have a lot. Michelle says, "Are you gonna make another mold?" I don't think I have the molding compound tonight, so unfortunately, I'm not gonna make the mold. I'm just gonna use these ones that are already prepared, and then I'll show you that, and then we'll go from there. So we'll just do the resin pouring tonight. So this is a mix of the pearlescent pigment powders. I've made kind of a blend of different ones. This is like normal. If you work with particulates that go airborne, it's a really good idea to wear a mask because if you don't, then your boogers will be sparkly. And some of the stuff you don't necessarily want to be breathing in. So, like some of them are heavy metal based, like titanium dioxide, and you don't necessarily want that like hanging out in your lungs. So, just be mindful wear a mask. It's not going to hurt you. If it is something that you're really concerned about, you can always go outside and do this part. But I have a soft brush, and this is a well-abused brush. And I'm just going to gently take this and load up my brush just like that. And then I'll put this and paint it on the inside of my mold. And the silicone is naturally a little bit sticky, or not sticky, but kind of like, yeah, it is kind of sticky in a way. But so it will hold the pearlescent pigment powder. So this is going to act kind of like if you're flouring a baking pan kind of business. So one of the things you do have to be mindful of is not putting too much, because if you add too much, what happens is the resin will sometimes form bubbles. Now, when you're working with a fast cast resin and it's an opaque resin, it's not the end of the world generally because you can't see the bubbles. They may be there, but you don't necessarily see them. So what I do is I paint the inside of my mold with the pearlescent pigment powders. And then once I'm finished painting this in there, this dry pigment powder onto the surface of this mold, then what I do is I tap out the excess. And what that does is it removes, generally what I'll do is I'll take a smaller mold that I've made and tap it out into a larger mold. And that way I'm not wasting anything. It's all going to go back into it. So if you're working with a translucent or clear resin, if you do put too much pigment powders, you will see the bubbles. There are things you can do to get the bubbles out, especially because it is such a much slower cure time with 8 hours. You can actually put it in a vacuum chamber and suck all the air out, and that can help as well. However, not everybody has a vacuum chamber, so that makes it harder. So you want just a light brushing of this on there, and you can see where it's been, where I painted it on and where I haven't. All right. And I'm going to keep going. I'm going to prepare my molds so that I have them to work on. And this one has a little bit too much of the resist, but that's all right. I'm just gonna, like I said, tap out the excess. Like this one has too much, and you can kind of tell when it's too much because it's kind of like crunchy, right? It's gonna be like extra powdery. It's gonna look like those donuts that they roll in the white sugar. So you don't want that. You want there to be like a sheen. Like this is way too much. Look. Too much. And you may not think, oh, that doesn't matter. But then when you get a bunch of pinholes on the surface of your thing and you have to patch all these pinholes, then you're like, oh, well, I could have took the extra 2 seconds to wipe it out and save myself, a bunch of time filling stuff with epoxy putty. So right now, that's all I'm doing is I'm dusting the molds. Sometimes there's aerosol spray cans of mold release, and those are wonderful. Do make sure you read the manufacturer's instructions because those are also not all the same. Some of them you spray it like Pam and it's good to go, and you can get pouring right away. Some of them you have to let them dry first before you can use them. So if you do have mold release, be sure to read, how exactly to use the one that you have, because they're not all the same. Some of them, it's got kind of a slick surface to them, and some of them, when you have to dry them, they create almost like a thin sheen of powder, and that thin sheen of powder is what actually it's like this. It creates that mold release, but in a dry powder form. And you also want to get into all the nooks and crannies. I try not to have too many undercuts and when I do a design. And what that means is when it kind of sticks out and protrudes, and then there's a piece kind of like in the inside that can get ripped out if you're not careful. So I try to limit those. With the mold putty, one of the nice things about working with the mold putty is that sometimes it helps get rid of those undercuts because it conforms to the surface of the master. However, it does, like with the pouring silicone, it gets all up in there. And sometimes with the mold putty, you can just like make it into a ball and smush it on top, and you won't get as many undercuts as say when you do a pouring mold. So just be aware of that. Sometimes if it rips the mold, it's okay because you can trim your molds and adjust the molds after. So that's something to also keep in mind. One thing I also do now that I didn't used to do is I make indications where the holes are going to be. And it can be helpful. For instance, with this piece, when I designed it, I added where the hole was going to be. And then that way, when I come through here with a drill bit, I can zip, zip, zip. And it's already got kind of a divot started where I can easily drill holes. Sometimes what would happen is I would wait to add my hole. And then, if you do kind of like production style stuff, sometimes the hole is off or, you can get too close to the edge. And it just is something that, you can avoid that if you by building it into your design. Now, if I don't like that hole, and this is the master, I can always plug that hole up with something else, like a 2-part epoxy clay. I can always fill the hole back in. If, for example, I want this to be like a cabochon instead of a pendant. So just keep that in mind when you're designing your pieces. I do think it is helpful to build in those holes. For example, like I knew that I wanted the hole to be up here for this ornament. So I put that in there, and then when I made the mold, I made sure to press that in there. And it captures a lot of detail. So, this is nice because before I was having to carve these all one at a time. And I don't mind that, but it takes so much longer. And if you make one really good one and then you make a mold of it, then you can make many of them, and it goes by pretty quick. All right. So, and I think that's good to think about. Like if you're doing a business, you have to think about things that you can quickly generate income. And so making holiday ornaments can be very lucrative, and I know some people that's all they do. Like one of my friends, that's all she does. She just makes only holiday ornaments, and she does a big Christmas thing and a big Halloween thing, and Valentine's Day, and the rest of the year she's just mostly working on getting ready for Christmas and Halloween. So, there's a lot of ways of running a business. But I don't mind it. I like it, but it's one of those things that I have to be in the mood to do this. It's not something, I think that like so often it can be a little bit tricky sometimes, to find that balance of wanting to do. Like, I don't love production work. Let me just put that out there. I like usually to make one of a kind things, and but sometimes that doesn't make it affordable or accessible to people. So I kind of have to bite the bullet and work on stuff that sometimes doesn't make me happy. Like, I guess it doesn't necessarily make me unhappy. However, I'd rather work on the masters and making the creatures than pouring resin all day. But sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. So there you go. All right, so I've got these all ready. And what I'm gonna use is this Smooth On material. We have these great big jugs. This is a bright white liquid plastic. See the rate, like it's got the talk of it. Don't skip that. This is the part A, and it says stir or shake part A and part B thoroughly before dispensing. So guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna shake the heck out of it because it told me to do it. Some resins you do not shake because it can create air bubbles. So just keep that in mind. Not all resins are created equally. So you have to keep that in mind while you're working. All right. So one thing that I like to do is I like to have graduated cups. However, because I'm not at the cottage, I don't have the graduated cups. So I made myself a couple different cups that I can pour into, and I kind of figured out the meniscus. All right. I think I still have them. And what you can do to figure that out, if you don't have any graduated cups and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to know. Let me see, do these have it? I don't have it. Shoot far. All right, so one of the ways that you can figure this out is I wonder if William's still watching. If William is still watching, can you come upstairs for a second? He may be cooking and hanging out with Ava. So what you do is, if you don't know how much this is, and you need to mix equal parts, you can get a measuring cup and fill it up with water, and then mark your cups. Let me see. Now, another trick that I always have is I always have paper towels on hand. And that's because you never know what's going to happen. And sometimes like a cup will break, or you never know what's going to happen. So it's good to have something like that on the ready, so that if something does happen, you can clean it up quickly, and then it's not going to be a big problem later on. So we've got that. And we're going to need to make our measuring cups. So what you do is you take and you get a measuring cup, and it's going to be like a half cup or whatever. And depending on how big you want, one thing I will recommend is don't fill it all the way up to the top, because if you fill it up to the top, there's two things that happen. Resin sets up with mass sensitivity. So when you have a lot and you have like a ton of resin, you got the whole cup, it will set up much faster than if you have a smaller quantity amount. Um, and that may not make sense. However, it's called mass sensitivity. So if you have a great big, you're mixing 2 gallons of resin at one time, that will set up much quicker than if you have like an ounce of resin. And I know that doesn't make sense, but that's what happens. And it's called mass sensitivity. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to see if I have a measuring cup up here, and then I'm going to write on this. The easiest thing to do is just to get cups that already have the graduations put on the sides, and you can also reuse them. So once you use it up, let it set up, and once it's hardened, then you can peel it out and you can reuse that cup over and over and over again. So that way you're not like making a massive amount of stuff to go into a landfill. All right, so I'm gonna go away for a second, and I'm gonna get a measuring cup, and I'm gonna get some water, and then I'm going to write on my cup how much is what. All right. All right, I'm back. So I'm going to show you the loving hands of home way of making your own graduated cup. All right, so this is a cup of water, and I'm going to pretend like this is an actual measuring cup, but in reality, this is like what we use to take like NyQuil or whatever drugs, but it's got a graduation. So this one says 30 milliliters. So what I'm going to do is fill it up until it hits that line. When that water gets filled up and it reaches that line, when you look at it from the side in a level cup, what that's called is a meniscus. And that's the line that is the top of the liquid surface of it's the line is the surface of the liquid. So that's a meniscus. So what I'm going to do then is I know this is 30 milliliters. So I'm going to pour this in this cup. And then I'm going to take my marker Actually, let me double this. So, because otherwise we're going to be here until the end of time. So what I'm doing right now is the wrong thing. And why it's the wrong thing is I'm holding it up in the air. In reality, this should be flat on a flat surface. So I'm gonna pour a little bit extra out, and there you go, 30 milliliters. So when I was holding it in my hand, it read 30 milliliters. However, there was more in the cup. So when it's on a flat surface like this, then it becomes, you get a true reading. And I know we're precisely eyeballing this. In some ways, you kind of have to do that. So what I'm doing is I'm taking this IdentaPen, which is like a Sharpie on steroids, which I love. And I'm going to write on the side of this cup where that line, aka meniscus, is. And I'm going to write this down. And this is going to be on the side of the cup. And I'll know that my part A has to come up to this line in order for me to have a successful pour. All right. So you can't really see that. I'll hold this up. So that's what that looks like on the side. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat the process again. So I'm going to fill this cup up to 30 milliliters and pour this in. And then I'm going to pour this in again for 30 milliliters and pour this in. And I'm going to repeat that, what I did earlier. And then I'll have my graduated cup. It's really important to have a steady level surface when you're pouring resin. And one of the reasons why is because if your table is crooked and there's a slope in your table, then when you're pouring your resin, all of your pieces are going to have that slope in it. Even if your mold is perfect, you're going to end up with your pieces are not going to feel flush and flat on the back. So just keep that in mind. You need a completely level surface for pouring resin. Unless you don't care, and then you can do whatever. But so I'm going to pour this water back out because that was just to get the measurement. And I'm going to dry this completely. I want to make sure that this is bone dry and that there is no more water left in here because that can throw off your resin. I'm going to put this off to the side so I don't accidentally knock into it. And I'm going to dry this out completely. And you may be like wondering, why am I going to all this extra trouble? Well, it's super important to be able to have a good, even container that you can kind of trust. Now, this is not scientific or anything. I've not got the micrometer out or whatever, but it is going to be good enough. And we're going to have to just, sometimes you have to dance with the date you got. And sometimes you don't have graduated cups. So you just have to make your own, just like so. All right, I'm going to put this all off to the side because I don't need it anymore. And then I'm going to shake my my part A and part B up again. Now, one thing I will say is that if you get a great big container like this, use it as quickly as possible because the air and the moisture that gets trapped inside of the container will cause it to turn. And so you have a window where it still will work. However, if I leave this go for another year or so, then the resin side won't be bad, but the hardener side usually gets kind of funkadoodle, and your resin doesn't always set up beautifully. This one got kind of sealed on, so I'm gonna have to pry this open with some pliers. All right. Now, another thing that I'm going to mention is that there is a film that they put on the top of the thing to keep it closed. And it's super important that you have at least a part of your opening to remove that film. And the reason why is that if you have like the film and you only bust a tiny hole in this, what's going to happen is it's going to guzzle out, and it's going to you're going to fill up more than you want. And I also keep that paper towel to wipe down the sides. And I also keep one paper towel for the part A and one paper towel for the part B. And the reason why I do that is so that I don't accidentally cross-contaminate, because if you accidentally cross-contaminate, then you can actually seal up the top of your container and you'll never be able to get it off. So then you have to cut it off, and then there's no real good way to close it back up. So it just takes a little bit of, you just have to be a little bit, careful with it, and you can have stuff last a good long time and not have to worry about it. All right, so what this says, before I mix it, I'm going to look over this instructions one more time. It says Smooth Cast 300Q is an ultra fast set liquid plastic, ideal for a variety of casting applications. Parts A and Part B are mixed 1-to-1 ratio by volume, and liquid cures to a solid plastic. Pot life is 30 seconds, 30 seconds, and cure time is approximately 4 to 5 minutes depending on mass. Store and use at 73 degrees Fahrenheit in a cool, dry place. All right, so I'm filling it up, and I'm on the clock, y'all. So no dilly-dally. Right, so I've got my container or my stir stick, and I'm going to scrape down the sides and the bottom, and I'm going to work quickly to get this nice and smooth. I'm going to make sure my molds are all flat and that they are level and that there's nothing underneath them. You can sort of see it will be cloudy at first, and then it will go clear. You can feel it starting to heat up. So I'm going to start filling my molds. I need to be quicker. I'm being too slow. And this one, I'll fill it up a little bit more. And it's starting to set up. All right. There you go. See, some of it got wasted because I started being slow. But you can see, we're going to look at this a little bit closer now. And this table, I'm realizing, may not be that level. So we're going to look at a couple different things right now. So you may notice that with this piece, I did not have any powder in this one as a mold release, and it's completely smooth on the back except for that little pore booger right there. And you can tell it's completely smooth. Now on this one, you can see those little pinpricks, right? That's because of the releasing agent the pearlescent powder that we put on. So people like, oh, it doesn't matter, whatever. Well, here you go. Now you can see. Now there's a couple other things that I'm going to talk about real fast while they're still curing. So if you noticed when I poured this, it started to become opaque in the center first, really quick on the center. And then the outside, there's like a little halo. And there's a little bit of a halo around it still that kind of looks a little bit gray in color. Or it looks a little bit liquid on the edges, right? So that means that because of the mass sensitivity, that the thickest parts are setting up first, and around the edges where all the details are, it's not set up yet. So you may go and you say, oh, it's so hard in the inside. It's so hard right now. It's all set up. It's a liar. It's not. So this one, you can see that it's set up very quickly. This happened, you know, you blink and you may have missed it. So just keep that in mind that it's not fully set up yet. So I'm going to let this set. Well, this is still kind of, you know, it's cured, but it's not fully cured. It's still kind of malleable. That's when I'm going to take this and peel this out because I want to be able to reuse this cup. If I wait, it will become rock hard, and then it's not going to be good. And sometimes with these cups, you can kind of gently bend it, and it will come out. But then also, sometimes these cups, they crack, so, you know, whatever. Okay, I'm going to do this off camera because I can't get the leverage that I need. Well, there we go. It won't come out. So I cracked it, unfortunately. So I can't reuse this cup, unfortunately. In most cases, there aren't ribs on the inside of your graduated cup. It's smooth on the inside of a graduated cup. So it pulls out real easy. However, because there are ridges on this container, they're getting stuck. So unfortunately, I can't get that out. I mean, I could maybe try to force it, but oh well. So we did lose some of that resin, unfortunately, because it's kind of dilly-dallying, but whatever. All right, so at this point, it's kind of hard, and you can kind of demold it. So we got one little pumpkin friend. Now, if you pull it out and it's still wet, then you know that you have to let it cure some more. So here's this one. That turned out pretty good. What do y'all think? And here's this. And then let's do this one. This is my favorite part because then it's like, wow. See this one? This is that raven. And so here we go. Let's pop this business out. Here we go. You like that? So here's the other thing that we have to think about. When this sets up, it sets up rock hard. I'm not playing y'all. It sets up hard. So if you have any lines where it's like, depending on how well you made your mold and how well you poured your mold, you may end up with some what's called flashing. And this is where, like, this, if you have a 2-part mold or the pieces met, sometimes in that kind of where they meet, sometimes the resin will go into that kind of that void in between, and it will kind of create this kind of like ruffle around your shape. In a 1-part mold, it's this stuff on the edge. While it's before it's fully cured, this is the time to take an X-Acto knife and quickly shave it off. Let me see if I have an X-Acto knife up here, because it's super important to do it while it's still relatively soft. I do have one, thankfully. And this is where, you have to be careful, sharp objects. This is also a good opportunity to wear safety glasses. So we're basically whittling plastic, and you don't want this to end up shooting in your eye because it can be sharp. So, you got to take, if you want to keep your eyeball sight, then you got to be careful. Now, generally speaking, I do this over a trash can so that I'm not littering the universe with little bits of sharp plastic, aka the floor. And I don't want to have to like step on it because it can end up in your foot. I'm not playing. And then so I'm just going around the edges and quickly doing this. They have a tool, and it's actually kind of handy, and it's called a deburring tool. And you can go, and it can just like, it slips. It's on some kind of like, I don't know what's on, but it's slightly curved, and it's super dang sharp. And they use it actually to the original intention for that tool was to ream out metal for like pipes and stuff. And so it's super duper sharp. But if you just kind of work quickly, you can see it's already stiffening up and becoming harder to carve. But you just kind of go around the edges and take off those sharp mold lines. And if I was a little bit, this resin, I like it, but it does set up a little bit faster than one of the other ones that I use. And I do like that I have an extra like I have a minute of work time instead of 30 seconds. So, it just depends on what brand you like and how quickly you work. Like I said before, I'm not a fast worker. So that's my problem, is that I'm not very quick. There you go. Maybe you're a quick worker. And then what I do after I do this is I take this over to my flex shaft, and I have a little sanding wheel, and I'll go around the edges. It's like this. Zzz, zzz, and I'll go around the edges. Zzz, and then I'll go around the back. Zzz, and then we'll add that texture. And I also look at the front too, because sometimes the fronts of the molds can get messed up. So in a couple different places, there's some sharp points, and that's usually where there's like a crease in the mold putty. And the mold putty, those creases, if you don't work with, so when you're making your mold, you roll it out into a very smooth shape that doesn't have any kind of creases or any kind of problems like that. And then you press it on top of here. if you have creases in it or you kind of mess around with your mold, putty material before it's set, sometimes it'll get these creases and you don't necessarily see it until you pour the resin. All right, so keep that in mind. And also, if you end up with any kind of these drips, that's also really good to clean up on the Fordham. I don't have a Fordham here though. I'm thinking about putting a bench in here because sometimes, we have the benches at the cottage, and it would be nice to be able to kind of work from here sometimes if I'm not in the mood to go to the cottage, or if I'm running behind, or I'm going to work from home today. Then I can work here as well and not get behind too much. All right. So I'm just going around the edges and cleaning up these lines. And then I also will drill holes with my Fordham. I kind of wait to drill the holes. I try to do the flashing and deburring pretty quickly while it's still, before it's set up, so it's not rock hard. And the other thing that I'm doing for safety purposes is that I'm cutting away from myself so that I'm not like going like this, because if you slip, then you make the blood. So when you're cutting, just cut away from yourself. Whenever I'm teaching a class with sharp tools, I say, first rule, don't cut the teacher. Next rule, don't cut your neighbor. And then the next rule, don't cut yourself. In that order. And the reason why is because I've seen, sometimes in classes, people, they get so kind of like maybe nervous, or they get so intimidated by like learning a new skill, or they're in a new studio, or, they've got other things on their mind. And it's almost like this weird thing that happens where people get a little bit careless sometimes. And I know some people who are like super duper, like really careful when they're at home. But then when they get into like a classroom setting, they get like wild. And like this one time, this woman was walking around, she had the knife out and she's talking and not really paying attention. And it looked kind of dangerous. Like she almost stabbed somebody. And it was like, whoa, 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 hold up. Don't be stabbing nobody. No trips to the ER today. And so it's just good to be, whenever you're in like a shared classroom space, just be a little bit more mindful, and just spend a little bit more time and consideration. And with materials, I've seen this also, like when somebody's like dishing out their own materials that they brought from home, they'll put the tiniest little drop, and you'd be like, you need more than that, you need a little bit more. And then just boom, a little tiny squeeze out, and it's like, all right, you use the gas, kind of squeeze a little bit harder. But then when it comes to teacher supply, they're like squeezing the whole bottle out. And so, it's just good to be considerate of others and spaces, because I feel like, I don't know what it is. I've seen it a lot in different classes. Like people just get like, not necessarily like hog wild, but they just get so like, I guess maybe nervous because they're outside of their comfort zone maybe. But I've seen this where people will get where they just don't care, or like there's a thing like, so one of my pet peeves in a metal studio is if you break a saw blade, stand up and put that broken saw blade in the sharps container. Don't wait. Do not wait. Stand up take that broken saw blade and put it in the sharps container, because I've seen this happen dozens of times where people will wait to do it and they'll just throw it in their bench tray and they don't think anything of it. And then when it comes to cleanup time, they take their bench tray and they dump the whole thing into the trash can. Well, guess what? That broken saw blade, which is sharp steel, goes into a plastic bag. And guess what happens? Whoever takes out the trash gets stabbed. And that's one of the reasons why there's a sharps container. It's so that people don't accidentally get cut. And it's for not only your safety, but the safety of who the janitor or the teacher or whoever's taking out the garbage, the studio assistant. And they may not be thinking of it because they're like, oh, there's a sharps container. I'm not going to get stabbed today. I'm sure everybody uses a sharps container, but I've seen this happen over and over and over again. Or when people are sweeping the floors, they'll throw their broken blades on the floor, and whoever's sweeping up, they just put it in the dustpan and knock it in the trash. And then there's all these broken blades in the trash, and you know what? People get hurt. So I've seen it with broken glass too. Like they'll just throw it in the garbage can like it's like nothing. But if you break a glass, wrap it in some paper towel, like a wet paper towel, or put it inside of a box or container, or just be. I always think of it as like, it may not affect you, but whoever is like taking out the trash. And this has happened to me before. I took out a garbage in one of the studios, and there was a door that was self-locking. One of those ones that you push the bar to open it, and it kind of has an automatic closing function on it, so that if you forget, you're not leaving the door open so that you'll get robbed and stuff. And but sometimes when you're taking out like trash or something cumbersome, sometimes it takes like a minute or like a couple extra seconds for you to push and then like get out the door. Well, what ended up happening was I was taking out the garbage, and the door hit the bag and the bag hit into me, and I cut up my leg pretty bad because people were throwing stuff away in the garbage that they weren't supposed to. It's also kind of like when you go to um like uh a cafe or whatever, and people, they take the hot coffee and they pour it directly in the garbage can instead of using the little wet container. And it's like, maybe folks don't know this, but the liquid goes into sometimes it's hot and it burns a hole in the garbage can, and then it leaks everywhere and it gets all kind of funky. And or when you go and you take the garbage can and you lift it up. I used to be a host in a restaurant, and this happened all the time. There was a bucket for wets, for liquid, and then we had all these signs: "Do not pour liquid in the garbage can." And folks would pour it in the garbage can, don't think anything of it, and then whoever is having to take out the trash, then they have to mop the floor and do all this other stuff. And sometimes, if it's a hot day, it can get funky. And I remember I worked in one of the parks, and it used to get super blanking hot in the summertime, like 100 degrees in the city kind of business. And people would pour milk into the garbage can, and in the morning time, and then by the afternoon, after it had been cooked in the sun all day, it would smell so terrible. And it was just terrible, and they could have just poured it into the bucket and alleviated that problem. So I just kind of think that whenever you're in a shared space, just use that extra little consideration of the people around you, and sometimes the people you don't even see. So there are certain things and procedures put in place. One time I was in a studio in art school, and somebody had spilled a bunch of, I think it was turpentine. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something that was like one of the cleaning chemicals. And they took and just wiped everything up. And instead of putting that into the fire trash can, because there are things called fire trash cans. They just threw it in the regular trash can. Well, it caused a chemical fire and it burned that studio down. So I think it's super duper important that there are all these safety measures put in place, and it just takes a couple extra seconds to do it. And maybe it's like embarrassing to spill something or break something, but you know what? It's better to take those extra seconds to, gather yourself, follow the safety procedures, and not hurt yourself or hurt other people. Amy said, people are trifling. Well, sometimes, I get it. Sometimes you just don't. It can be embarrassing, or people just don't think. They just get like caught up in the moment, and they just don't really think. But I've also seen this. The other thing is wasting materials, and that's another big thing. That's a pet peeve of mine. So we don't really have a ton of extra money, um, and I work really, really hard for our art supplies. Like, I go without getting new clothes so that I can buy art supplies. And that's something that I've become okay with, right? It's something that, like, you know, it's okay with me. So I can go without so that I can have good art supplies. It's like with beads. Like, I like to work with really good quality beads. So sometimes I go without certain things so that I can get the things that I want to work with. And there's no shame in that. Like, sometimes you have to make decisions. And so for me, a lot of times my materials are super important to me. Like, my tools are super important to me. I worked really hard to get those things. And some of the materials, there's like, you work with silver. I don't work a lot with gold because I can't afford it. But like, I saw like in a couple different classes, um, we were working with silver, and in some cases fine silver, and there's like great big pieces of it, and people are just throwing in the trash. And the thing about that is, like, I get it. It may not seem like a lot. It maybe seem like, oh, maybe that's like a couple dollars worth of silver, but it's still ending up in the trash. And there's also, like, if you knew what had to go into making that metal, it's a big process. I mean, it's when they work with gold, they basically scar the face of the planet and create these cyanide drips, and they refine the metal through that process. So, it's a very ecologically impactful process. So this is something that's precious. When they have coal for the coal forges, some people, they get real cavalier and then they just start throwing stuff in the trash. But that coal it's not, it doesn't go cost free. It's something that, it takes a lot of time and resources to dig it from the earth and process it and refine it sometimes. And it's a big thing. And maybe it doesn't matter because it's not yours, and sometimes it's like the classroom space, or you just don't want to mess with it. But at the same time, it's like a precious commodity, at least to me. And so I kind of, when I'm in those spaces and I see people just like throwing away silver, and like not even like dust, like big pieces of silver, it just takes 2 minutes extra to put that in the refining. It just takes 2 seconds extra, or to sweep it in a little baggie and give it to the teacher because they can refine it, you know. And so I kind of feel like sometimes it's one of those things like if I teach anything, I want to helpfully impart that, a respect for your materials because, um, I think it matters. It matters to have and be like conscious of what you're doing and not wasting. Um, Michelle says, "What? Silver in the trash?" And she said, "Why are they not melting it down and using it again?" That's my question. It's a perfectly fine material that can be reused. And yet some people they just throw it away. And I don't like that. It's one of those things that just takes just a minute or two more to be a little bit mindful of your materials. And you can contribute to less waste and something that is a precious material, a certifiably precious material does not get wasted. So for me, I think that's important to think about. And it's just having a respect for not only your teacher but the materials that you're working with. And I think if you develop good practice, like I know some people are like, well, at home I refine. Well, why not do it in where you are now? There are programs that some of the schools are involved with. They're called sweeps, and what they do is they take those sweeps, the stuff that you get out of your bench tray, and they raise money for good causes. Like there's a program called Surf Plus, which they help people and artists who are in emergency situations. And if somebody's studio burns down, then they give them money to rebuild and put safety equipment in, and they really do a lot of help. And the only way that they can afford these things if people donate. Well, one of the ways that you can donate is to do, they have a sweeps collection. So you can send off, if you don't want to refine the silver or if you don't want to refine the gold, they will. There are people who are happy to refine things and use that so that they can fund their programs that help people who are in need. So if I can instill anything when I'm teaching and helping spread the word about things, it's just using a little 1 or 2 seconds extra to be mindful about what you're doing and the materials that you're working with for safety, and also to have things not go to waste. If you are, in a situation where you're using somebody else's materials, just instead of like squeezing the whole bottle out, just put a couple drops to start and see if you like it. Because sometimes, like with paint, if you mix up like a whole cup full of acrylic paint, you know what? You may use like 2 second, like two little brush strokes of it, and then it goes to waste because it dries out. So, I don't like to waste things, and hopefully, I can teach that to others so that they don't end up wasting things. Because also, when you go home and you're in your own studio, if you have a good practice of, cleaning up and being mindful of your materials, then you're going to take that to your home and you're going to apply that to your own kind of work. And, I think it's a good practice to have. There's a wonderful resource out there called the Ethical Metalsmiths, and they have a lot of information about the extraction process of precious metals and the ecological impact of working with new materials and how materials are circulated and how materials are, where they come from and how they're processed and how they get into your hands and what that kind of equates. So if you have questions about that and developing a little bit more of a mindful studio practice, I would definitely recommend checking them out. They have symposiums and conferences and it's a really lovely resource so that you can, in your own work, be a little bit more, just thinking about things in the future and how to lessen your kind of footprint. And, if we all do small things that may seem, in the world where there's like climate change and these great big things that are happening that we feel like we're kind of out of our control. If every one of us does something small, even just a small, tiny little act, it adds up. And I know sometimes it seems hard or it's inconvenient or it doesn't make sense or it just seems like a big hassle. But if we all do just a little bit, just 1% or even half a percent of a mindful shift, it all adds up and it will eventually hopefully make a little impact. And if other people see you acting in this way and you're a good advocate for it, maybe it will spread. And it's something that's like a ripple in the ocean where you throw, it's a little pebble, but it makes ripples and it can affect a lot of people and spread outward that way. So at least that's my hope. Lena says, ha, in my last metalsmithing class, people were guarding their silver like Thunderdome. Wow, that's good. I mean, I can see that. There is something to be said about like, I've been in classes where people are like like proprietary that they're like, that was my speck of silver. And that I kind of am like, okay, we need to ease up just a little bit. But I've been in classes where I've seen people, no joke, take and dump that straight into the garbage. And I'm like, all right. Like one of my neighbors in one of the classes, she starts getting ready to pour it into the garbage. And I was like, whoa, I got a bag. And so I took her sweepings and I'm going to make some really cool stuff with it. One of the cool things about when stuff is already kind of ground down and sawed and there's like shavings and stuff is you can kind of sprinkle it on the top of metal, like smooth metal, and fuse it to the surface, and it creates this really wonderful kind of um a really wonderful texture. And it's a great way to use that. So you don't have to go through the full refining process of sending it off and waiting for a check. You can use that today, or tomorrow, more likely. Um, so it's in a form that is not kind of like, useless. There is value and worth to things that sometimes people just throw away. So, anyways, that's me on my soapbox, and I already finished cleaning these up. Off camera, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of scrub the backs of these with some sandpaper and get some of the sharp points off. I'm going to drill holes, and then I'm going to put down a wash of a raw umber color and wipe off the excess like this. And then I can add color and start painting. And what I generally do is I work from the middle tones. And what I'll do is I'll put kind of like an all over color, and sometimes I'll wipe it off or whatever, slightly brighter than what the color that I'm trying to achieve. And then what I do is and go over that with another wash of this. And what that does is it brings out the detail. And I don't know if I have one that isn't. Well, I have this. And this one I didn't wipe off nearly as much of the patina as I would have liked. But you can see, like, with this one, you can't see the details as well of this. And what I'll do with this is I'll take and put a lighter color and do kind of hit the highlights of that. and that will really bring out kind of those details, and it will accentuate the sculpture that I've worked on. So it will help. Um, if you have this all monochromatic, sometimes what happens is you just really can't see. Your eye kind of edits out the details, so you see more of like a silhouette. And with this, you then start seeing like the folds around the eyes and the mouth. And the other thing that I do is wherever it's supposed to be dark, like in the mouth, I will darken that even more. So I'll have like a little bit of black paint and I'll go around in certain areas and I'll make sure that those are really dark. And then in light areas, which are the highlights, I'll hit it with a lighter color. And that will help really pop and give this kind of, they call this bas relief, where it's on one side, there's a sculptural thing, and there's a little bit of an illusion of depth. Um, and uh, it can make that look even more dimensional. Laura says, someone's trash is another's treasure. Correct. Lena says, love these. So exciting you're making these again. Yeah, hopefully I'll make a couple more and I'll have some for sale because I really like these, but I never, we get busy or in our interests change, whatever, and you just get out of the habit of making them or whatever. And so I think this is fun and hopefully people like them. And like I said, they're real durable. So in polymer clay, if I do this, it gets real kind of fragile. So it's nice to be able to have this and it be a little bit more sturdy. Okay. Michelle said, thanks, Andrew. That's a lot I learned today. Well, I hope you all had a great time tonight hanging out with me and making some resin. We went through and we talked about the masters. We talked a little bit about how to make molds. I showed you how the mold and how to put the mold release in. We poured the resin. I showed how to make your own graduated cup if you don't have one. And we went through how to clean it up. And we talked about some of the finishing steps. So there is quite a lot that we talked a lot about tonight. We've been on for about 2 hours. If you do use any of this fast cast resin or you do any resin work, we would love to see. Please make sure that if you kind of use these tutorials or find them helpful, to tag us and help boost the signal. It's always very helpful if y'all can, help with that. Because I feel like if you find something to be interesting, entertaining, or useful, entertaining, or interesting, it's always good to kind of give credit where credit is due. All right. Well, I hope you had fun tonight. We're going to be back on tomorrow. Normally, we're not on Saturdays, but we'll be on tomorrow evening for a special live event with Ava Motherwell at Allegory Gallery in Johnstown. And we're going to have a kind of a total request live. We're going to pick some things. And I hope you all have a great time. So please tune in tomorrow evening. Make sure you get yourself ready, get comfortable, get them comfort clothes on, get them fingers ready to put orders in because it's going to be a really fun time. And I know that both Ava and us will appreciate your support. We really want to make sure that Ava has a good time and makes lots of money, and maybe she'll come back. So, all right. So we'll see y'all later. See ya.